you see. So I'm really excited not to have to shovel myself out of my house this morning to go here. It's an amazing thing to live in now, what is the snow capital of our nation. I wanted to say a little bit about the Katoomba group, a little bit about this meeting, and a little bit about our marine and coastal program that's relatively new at Forest Trends. When we launched Forest Trends 10 years ago, our first initiative was to gather together the group of innovators that had been working in this space that we were calling ecosystem service payments and markets. That was in the year 2000, and we'd been invited by the Sydney Futures Exchange to come out to Australia and to help them communicate to their audience, Australians, that their idea of launching the first carbon futures exchange was not crazy. So they wanted sort of a cast of international experience around these things to support them in this initiative. It was a little bit like this meeting, much smaller. There were roughly sort of 60 of us. There are a couple of people here today, Ricardo and a couple of others that I think were with us then. But it was unusual in that we not only had the usual cast of environmentalists and researchers and government agencies, but we also had investment banks with us, and we also had insurance groups with us, and we also had a range of private businesses with us at this meeting. The Sydney Futures Exchange never did launch that carbon market, but the Katoomba group carried on. And I think the value that that group saw there was that they didn't realize that there was anybody else on the planet really thinking about these ideas. So we have been continuing with the work of Katoomba as a kind of a global network that tries to help think about cracking some of these difficult problems around emerging environmental markets. And as Steve said in the beginning, and as Amber also mentioned, for us the mission really has been over the last 10 years, how do you meld these different worlds, the values of natural resources that we know, economic values and community values, how do you roll those together? That in a sense would be what we would call kind of the mission of the Katoomba group. And just after the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment was launched, I started having discussions with my neighbor, Tunde Gardi, about the application of some of these emerging markets that we've been working on in terrestrial space. So obviously carbon trading, but things like biodiversity banking, wetland mitigation banking, a range of different types of markets that were all emerging, but all becoming quite real in the terrestrial space, and trying to figure out, was there an application for these kinds of instruments in marine settings and coastal settings? And I'm a trained forester, but even being kind of oriented towards forests and terrestrial types of issues, it was clear to me that there was an interconnectedness between what we were doing on the landscape in terms of activity and the way that was flowing into streams, estuaries, and marine environments. So it was clear in my mind that there was some connection, but it took some training by Tunde to really kind of understand what these issues were in a marine environment. So things like coastline stabilization, beach maintenance, the nursery functions that mangroves and seagrass plays, all of these things really are the functions that we think about for marine and coastal setting. And it was really from those conversations that we said it might be interesting to start to explore whether these connections could be made. So that was sort of the natural reasoning why a group like my organization's name is Forest Trends. Like, what are we doing with a marine program? Which is the first question we get from a lot. And I think it just follows the logic of nature. You know, that these are completely interconnected systems. If we're going to be effective at solving some of these problems, we have to think in those and along those system lines. It says here, this is the 16th Katoomba event. So over the last 10 years, we've had 16 global events all around the world, from incredibly important forest and ecosystem regions like Brazil and Thailand and Ghana and Tanzania to marketplaces, so London, Tokyo, Switzerland, Washington. The idea is that this new vocabulary, this new concept that we're talking about, people need to understand it. They need to understand, everybody that needs to be a part of this needs to understand these concepts. But it feels like to me, and Adam Davis or Ricardo, I'd be curious about your thoughts, but it feels like the first Katoomba to me in many ways, because here we are in a kind of a completely different realm now, a completely different biome. And the list of people that are with us, the people that are in this room, I think will all have the same feeling that they're not used to the company they're keeping right now. And that is exactly what we found in that first Katoomba meeting, was that you're sitting around a room with a lot of people you haven't talked to before, because you didn't realize they were a part of this, about this community you're part of. So that is objective number one of the Katoomba group in this meeting, frankly, is to start to build this unusual community that needs to be talking together if we're going to solve these problems. We also would like to call on this community, and hopefully it develops, to help guide us in Forest Trends and in Katoomba to think about where we could put our energies and where we could use them best. So some sort of a blueprint about what would be the opportunities, what are the needs when we start to think about ecosystem service payments in marine and coastal settings, what are the kinds of support that we need, and what can Katoomba bring to that. So help us build the blueprint of this work going forward. That is, for people that don't know Forest Trends, we're a little organization by design. And what that does is it forces us intentionally to work in partnerships, because our philosophy of change is that it's that kind of broader coalition that is really going to be effective over the long term. So we are very honest in saying, help us figure out what we should be doing going forward. And the third objective really of the Marine program and what we hope to get a start of in the next days out here is, as Steve was saying, is that it's great to start to get the concepts right, to get the connections right, but we want to be able to put demonstrations on the ground that show how this works. There's nothing more powerful than demonstrations that are successful. So those would really be the three major objectives when I think of the Katoomba meeting, the work that the Katoomba group hopes to be able to support around the space, and the objectives of the MARS program, the Marine and